Hello again. The United Nations Population Fund has revealed that 4.3 million girls are at risk of female genital mutilation this year, and that number is expected to rise by 2030. The organization has supported over 3,000 initiatives within the last 5 years where men and boys actively advocate to bring an end to the practice. For more on this, we're now joined by Unicef Regional Child Protection Advisor, Eastern and Southern Africa, Andy Brooks. Andy, thank you for your time this afternoon. Perhaps let's start with an overview of how far and wide this practice is on the continent.
Sure. Well, unfortunately, it's a widespread problem. 31 countries all over the world, not exclusively in Africa, but mostly in Africa. And this rallying call today on the day of zero tolerance of FGM comes because there's a growing recognition or fear that the Sustainable Development Goal that this practice would be completely eliminated by 2030 is quite off track. Indeed, whilst we're looking at 4.3 million girls today, it could be increased to as much as 4.3 or 4.6 million by 2030. So there are reasons for concern.
That it is not going down but accelerating, we put that down to what?
Different phenomena, including, of course, particularly in our continent, and I'm in the region of East and Southern Africa, but it's the same in West and Central Africa, of a growth, a demographic growth that's very significant. Sometimes as the numbers increase, it's difficult to keep on top of the percentage and the prevalence actually going down. So the numbers go up even if the percentage of girls being cut may decrease. We've had very encouraging decrease over the years. I could tell you, for example, in the region where I am, East and Southern Africa, girls who were cut under the age of 15 was 71.4% in 1995, and it's dropped down to 8% now. So if you cover all the countries as a whole, it's an encouraging trend going downwards. But nevertheless, there are some particular countries, we could think of Guinea in West and Central Africa or Somalia in this region, where the rates are still very, very high, practically universal, near 100% rates. So it's very uneven levels of progress, I could say.
In trying to understand the impact of the interventions that you have put forth or are proposing, what is it that we're hearing from these communities in terms of why they continue, especially perhaps in your region in Eastern and Southern Africa?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that the overall there is a decrease. So we should, as much as this is a rallying call, try to be positive. But and one of the messages that I think has got through clearly is around the health risks and consequences for girls of this practice, particularly in childbirth and sexual reproductive health as they get older. And then the other one is the engagement of the influential people, and this is where the rallying call today came around engaging men and boys. Many of the societies, of course, in the region and in the continent are patriarchal. Men make the decisions. So by engaging with the community influencers, religious leaders, community elders who are often male, predominantly male, that's been one of the significant strategies for actually having more impact and getting more people to believe that the practice has to stop. Over the world, there are 31 countries, like I said, where this practice is, with about 300 million men in them. And of the latest surveys that have been done, because those surveys ask about attitudes, do you think it's a good practice to continue? Do you agree with it? 2/3 of the men are actually saying now that this is a practice that they don't agree with. So there are encouraging signs, but like I said, there are some countries where the practice still continues to be very high, and then there are some risks. If we understand the drivers for the practice around poverty, gender inequality, and you look at current threats around climate change, poverty, increased risks of living, particularly where I am, because you asked about that, in the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya, 3 countries where the practice is quite regularly done. As we see risks of poverty and girls getting married off younger and more of them, often part of the trajectory or the footway towards getting married young is to be cut. So there's this risk and indeed evidence of an increase in FGM in some of the countries which are really in crisis currently.
Sure. So the numbers keep going up and down if we're projecting that there's a risk of an increase next year, meaning that the target to end the practice in 2030 will not be met.
Exactly. That's the fear. And again, I come back to the gender issue and the particular accent on men and boys. If boys, young boys growing up now, the 5-year-olds, the 10-year-olds, the 15-year-olds, can stop believing and can be supported to stop believing that they have to have a bride who's been cut, because that represents somehow purity. If the beliefs that this is somehow coming from a religious doctrine, a religious text, there's no evidence for that. If that can be stopped, then we can also start to really get over some of the reasons why girls are married, which is often about acceptance within society and acceptance by male-driven society. So those are really some of the areas why we put this particular call around engaging men and boys today.
How's that going? I mean, you mentioned a myriad of issues, right? So it's not just about changing the perceptions of the boys. You spoke about some driving factors, including poverty, including status. And now you've got these older men who are passing this practice on to not only their younger boys, but are compelling these young girls whom it would appear they have no choice but to get into it. So how's that engagement going with the young ones, catching them while they're young?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's look at some different scenarios. In the areas of Ethiopia, for example, there's a region called Somali region on the border with Somalia. Long-term work being done there on FGM and child marriage. Country as a whole, Ethiopia has done so much to boost levels of gender equality and economic opportunities for women. Is experiencing significant crisis because of the drought in that part of the country, and together with the government authorities there, we're seeing the levels of child marriage going up as high as 151% more than the previous reading on a previous year, and linked to that would be the practice of FGM. So in that particular context, very worrying, because a country that made so much progress could be about to lose some of the well-fought gains that it's made. Other places, in terms of the engagement, one of the major, I would say, revolutionary partnerships has been with the Interreligious Council of African Leaders. That's been a partnership that, together with Unicef and UNFPA, has been going for a number of years. And there, you continue to see the degree to which they can be influential and actually change norms and influence social ways of thinking, and including within this practice. So young boys growing up, hearing different kinds of messages than maybe their dads did or their granddads did before them.
Mm-hmm. Andy, thank you very much for your time. Andy Brooks, Regional Child Protection Advisor at UNICEF.